Hi, I'm Phil Kurz, contributing editor at TV Tech Magazine and TVTech.com. I'm here today with Simon Hawkings, Director of Sales Strategy at Ross Video, for this executive Q&A. We're here to discuss some of the major technology trends that emerged during the 2025 NAB Show. Simon told me prior to this that he spent much of his time at the convention walking the floors looking at technology. So this should be an interesting conversation. Simon, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Phil.
Set the stage for us. What technologies and trends caught your eye at the show?
It's NAB, so there's always a lot going on. It's a very interesting show, and it's changing every year. This year, if I was going to bring it down into three big topics, I would say number one would be cloud and software, kind of put those things together into one bucket. AI, of course, which is on everybody's lips, every stand, every event, every session. And then another area that I was going to put together into one area that I think is I call engagement, which is really about how the industry is engaging with our consumers, ultimately viewers.
You mentioned AI. It seems to touch so many aspects of the business these days, from making and coding more efficient to creating rich metadata and beyond that. How do you see the interest level among attendees at the show, and was there any particular AI application that stood out?
I mean, interest unbelievably high. I think every meeting, probably with every manufacturer and every customer, one question was always, "What are you guys doing with AI? Like, what's going on with AI?" So everybody wants to know how they can leverage this technology. Um, and I saw this time at NAB because there was talk about this last year and at IBC in Europe, of course, in September. But this time around, it seemed to be moving from hype into something that's more operationalized. People are using stuff in a practical way every day, and there's all kinds of things: AI, graphics automation, transcription, auto tagging of metadata, even like fully assisted productions where somebody might make a fully created show without actually having an operator, which is pretty cool. Um, and then really practical stuff like highlight and clip generation, and one thing that Ross does, which is use AI in our cameras for facial and body tracking, all of those kind of things. And it matters because it's not really about reducing staff. It's about taking the same staff we've got, but doing more stuff with them. So faster turnaround, better personalization, and basically doing all of those things with the same staff.
There's been a lot of buzz about ChatGPT and other LLMs in media. Did you see their presence or feel their impact at the show?
I mean, I feel it every day almost in my day to day job. Everyone is using some kind of LLM for their day to day work, and they've kind of become like a silent collaborator, working in the background. And I think that is really how the industry and many industries are using it. It's about reducing the time that we spend on menial tasks, great for research and for helping with drafting and things like that. Um, but certainly in the broadcast world, and especially in the news media, um, LLMs are a risk as well as an asset. And there needs to be this level of human editorial veto on top, which I think is creating a little bit of concern. So there's a lot of AI charters going around with the big media companies where they're saying we're going to use this, we're going to use that, but within these parameters. So I think I saw a lot of people walking around having conversations with ChatGPT at the show. So there's obviously day-to-day use of this tech, and I think it's great as long as we have some guardrails in place to manage it.
So your first item was the cloud that you mentioned. I was wondering how you see the cloud uptake among M&E companies these days, and where the cloud is headed, as evidenced at the show.
Yeah, it's huge. I think throughout my some 20 odd year or odd career in broadcast, we've gone through all these different transitions. Right when I very first joined, in the late 90s, there was still some analog around. So there was analog to digital, digital to HD, HD to UHD, and of course all the different tapes formats, all this stuff, and that has kind of driven the economies of the industry, especially as a tech manufacturer, as we try and update customers to the latest technology. But this is really different. This is a more fundamental change in how we're going to do business as well as how the technology works. And especially where Ross is coming from in the live production world, this is the big shift that's going to happen as we move from selling metal, to selling minutes. which is how it's going to go. It's going to be much more about selling time of production than it is about selling boxes. And so that was evident at the show, and everybody has cloud first or software first solutions. Like all of the major manufacturers have that. There's a whole battle going on now of platforms as well. Like, how are we going to make this software operational? Um, but it is working now. So I think a lot of the technical barriers are going away, and they're going away very fast. So AWS showed, uh, I think, 30 interconnected demos for different types of live production using all kinds of different manufacturers from across the industry. So it's driving towards a certain level of collaboration that we're going to have. And it matters because we need to do things faster. We need to have a quicker go to market. Like, our customers need to be able to get their content to market faster, and reduce dependency on proprietary hardware. And so it was really good to see a very operational use of software and cloud at the show. And it's kind of becoming um, a mantra among some buyers that they want to look at cloud first. Maybe they won't end up doing it, but they want to look at cloud first.
So if you look 5 to 10 years down the road, where do you think media workflows will stand with respect to the cloud?
I mean, it's what I think about a lot in my day to day job, looking at long term strategy, for Ross from a sales perspective. And I think I can't imagine a world in 10 years' time where kind of 80% of the workflow isn't done in software, and by extension cloud. So I think that's the future that we're driving towards now. Like I said, moving from metal to minutes, where infrastructure is kind of it's written in code, not built with boxes. And as we move to that future, our customers are having to make a big shift as well. So tech stacks that have been built for many, many years, complexity that all of these folks have built up needs to be broken down and come back in software. So I can see it being a really interesting time, and maybe a more fundamental shift than we've seen in the past, where we've been updating technology but continuing to use physical boxes, on-prem boxes, to do those workflows. So it's going to be a very, very interesting time, and that horizon, I think 5 to 10, is where we will see these major changes taking place.
So the third big bucket of trends that you identified was viewer engagement. And there's more competition than ever for viewers and ad dollars. What developments that relate to viewer engagement did you see at the show?
Yeah, I think there's a few different levels to this. On one level, it's about advertising. How can we get to consumers in a more personalized fashion and then charge more for those ads? And I think there's one big thing that's happening, especially in the US market at the moment, which is the rollout of ATSC 3 next gen TV, which means that there's a backhaul for these broadcasters that previously were just putting shows out over the air, and that was it. They were out there. They could check with Nielsen and things like that, but there was no real way to have a close relationship with your consumer. And ATSC 3 changes that, because all of a sudden now I know who's watching, and I know what they're watching and when. And so this is driving up ad revenue for some of these more traditional media companies, which is great because they've obviously been struggling with cord cutting over the last few years. But those viewers are still watching that content somewhere. And in fact, people are watching more, and they're watching more live as well, which is, I think, is great for us. But it just means that we need to embrace some of this new technology in order to be able to connect even closer with our customers. And I think the way that people watch television is changing so much. And the big news just that came up just before the show was that YouTube became the largest media company in the world, overtaking Disney, which is quite amazing. I don't think we could have imagined that. I mean, when I started in 2002, there was no YouTube, right? So I think it's really, really interesting times. And the NAB said, they predicted they have this creator lab now, which is where they have a bit more focus on the creator community, and they created a forecast that said this market would be worth $500 billion, the creator market, by 2030, and that would be made up of 50 million professional creators. So I think there's a great level of interest in how the industry is going to shift and how we can take advantage of that growing market.
Yeah, and finally, if you step back a little bit and don't address the individual buckets, but you just look at the NAB show, from a higher level, uh, do you think this creator community that you identified is going to have greater representation at the show going forward? Are there going to be other developments that will kind of drive the direction of the show?
Yeah, I think I noticed it in the last couple of years. I think it was 2 years ago or last year they had Casey Neistat as one of the keynote speakers, and he's a big vlogger, one of the original vloggers on YouTube. And then this year they had Dar Man, who was somebody that I wasn't really aware of, but he's a huge Facebook content creator. And so I think they are shifting. They're realizing that there's a lot of interest from creators. How do they start to make shows that look like high end shows? Right, from their own studios at home, and how can they grow into media organizations from just being solo content creators. So I think that is going to be a big change for NAB, and I can already see them pivoting towards that. I think NAB in general, the show is kind of changing a little bit from our perspective. It is still, David Ross described it as the Super Bowl for broadcast manufacturers, which I think is what it is. And it is still the big event of our year. We invest very heavily in the show, and we go en masse to make sure that we meet with all of our customers and speak to them about ongoing projects and new opportunities. And it is fantastic. But as a European, I'm always looking at IBC as well and what IBC are doing. And I noticed that over the last couple of years, IBC has been growing and NAB has been shrinking a little bit. So I wonder if NAB is the Super Bowl, then maybe IBC is going to be the World Cup final for broadcast manufacturers going forward. But yeah, lots of interesting stuff, and definitely the creator economy is going to become a big part of NAB moving forward.
That's all the time we have. I want to thank Simon Hawkins for sharing his thoughts and to remind all of you to follow the latest industry developments at tvtech.com and in the TV Tech print edition of the magazine. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.